All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the BrainFood Show. This one, once again, featuring Karl Smallwood. Karl, hey.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
It's very well, yeah. I've got my cup of tea, ready to learn some facts and speak about some facts that I wrote for you 5 years ago now.
Yeah, totally. And also, so stereotypically, the British are like experts in tea. Do you find yourself to be very particular on the way tea is made?
Not so much, no. I'm just a milk and two sugars kind of guy.
Yeah.
So just builder's tea.
Bag tea or
Yes.
loose leaf? Nice.
I don't like loose leaf tea. I don't like drinking liquid and having bits in it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's orange juice, then it's got to have pulp. So I've got to taste my oranges.
You did one a long time ago on the power outages or the power spikes on commercial breaks in TV shows in Britain, which I thought was fascinating.
TV pickup. Yes, the short version of that is over in the UK. So many people make a cup of tea after major like television events, such as like sporting events, football matches, soap operas, that sort of thing. There is a noticeable and has a quantifiable effect on the power grid, and they actively have to plan for it because just kettles are a very power intensive device. And with clockwork regularity, millions of Britons will turn on at the same time. So the power grid has to adjust. And we have to borrow power from France.
Well, and I thought that was fascinating that they have the person who's literally there counting down. They have to first, the TV has to tell them when the commercials are coming. And they have the person there who's like finger on the button ready to hit it to ramp up the power right when there's needed so you don't have any brownouts or anything.
What gets me is that we have to borrow energy from France, which is just the country-sized equivalent of asking a neighbour for some sugar, right?
Yeah.
There's like knocking on France's door, like, can we have some power to make some tea? It could bring the power grid to its knees. Like they have to have a guy whose entire job is just predicting when people are going to make a cup of tea. She's very British. I'd be very proud to write that one.
It's fascinating also because I don't think most people like really think about that the power grid is this sort of on-demand thing and it has to stay within a certain band. You go to spike too high, you can blow out devices, you can, do that sort of stuff. You go too low and then, bad things shut off and these sorts of things. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. You guys have that too, that basically water battery where they have it ready to pump. They can turn it on so it's like an instant hit. And then at night when they have excess electricity, they pump all the water back up to the top of the mountain.
Use it to pump the water, yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So what are we talking about today, though? We are going to, for the appetizer in today's, we are going to do what the 57 in the 57 varieties of Heinz stands for. And you might think from that 57 varieties of Heinz, it's 57 varieties, but that is not actually the case. And then also the next up is that time. A guy cornered the liquid soap market by sneakily buying nearly every hand soap pump available in the world, which is just...
The Pump Baron. My favourite article I ever wrote. My favourite script.
In the dessert, we're going to do the rags to riches, the junior high dropout, who created a tasty billion-dollar empire. And that one's super interesting, too. Just like three stories of entrepreneurs who have their own little niche of changing the world. Let's kick it off with Henry Heinz. So Henry Heinz got his start selling food products all the way back at the tender age of 8 years old. At the time, he helped his mother in her garden and would take the vegetables around his neighborhood, selling them door to door. 1 year later, using a recipe his mother had taught him, he started making and selling his own horseradish sauce, which later would be the same sauce he would found his first major company selling at the age of 9. People were way more industrious back then. You had like Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison at like 12 or whatever, he's off on a train, where he leaves at whatever it is, 7 in the morning, comes back at 9 or 10 at night, multiple cities around, and he's just, working the train.
Yep, you had, who is it now? Mozart, like writing symphonies when he was like 7 years old. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Is it Mozart or Beethoven who wrote that one? They wrote their own lullabies as kids. And then you have like Warren Buffett, probably a apocryphal story, but he'd talk about how he'd walk around his neighborhood like buying and selling things. And that's how he got his taste for business.
We should do one sometime on Mozart's less talked about works where they were just complete like musical porn. The lyrics, everything, and he would write for women and things some of them were quite hilarious.
Including one of my favorites. I don't know how to say it in German, but it just translates to lick my ass.
Yeah.
And just
that he sent, he sent it to like his cousin or something, I think too. It was, something like that. But In any event, going back to Heinz, his parents who soon gave him around 3/4 of an acre to support his entrepreneurial endeavors. And while just 10 years old, he was now selling large quantities of vegetables and horseradish sauce around his neighborhood. 2 years later, he expanded his operation to nearly 4 acres and was even selling to local grocery stores. He continued growing in this way, and at his peak before going to college, grossed around $2,400 per year, which would be around $55,000 today. Rather than...
Bad, right? To hear this. 12 years old, earning $55,000 a year.
Yeah, and Edison, too, on his train on the side when he would, because during the thing he didn't have a lot to do during some of the trips. So he would run his experiments. He was always working on stuff. And then he also ran a business. At one point, he was printing a newspaper on the train, like gathering local news from each place. Then he would write it, print it, sell it to the next town. And he also was selling like produce he would pick up at different towns, all as like a young teen. And I can't remember his peak earnings, but it was something like crazy for a teen like that, like $10,000 a month equivalent today or whatever.
Just the hustle is real.
Yeah. And then he made his first million. One of his first things he sold, I think he was only like 20 or 21, his first major inventions. But in any event, Heinz, now all grown up, rather than continue expanding at this point, he instead chose to go to college and earned a degree in business. And then Heinz...
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
You've already got practical experience. But Heinz's first business that he founded after college actually went bankrupt after just 6 years in operation. The company was called Heinz Noble and Company, co-founded by Heinz and L. Clarence Noble. They started out selling more or less the same horseradish that he sold as a child. Unfortunately for him, the Great Depression hit starting in 1873 with the Panic of 1873 and continuing until 1879. And of course, this was not the Great Depression that we call the Great Depression now, but that's what it was called at the time. It eventually got its name usurped, by the later,
better known
6 years later,
Greater Depression.
The Greater Depression. So then this other depression became known as the Long Depression. So the Long Depression ultimately affected much of Europe and the U.S. While there were many events that led up to the eventual trigger, that trigger in the U.S. ended up being the failure of the J. Cook and Company Bank, which had overextended itself in putting way too much capital into the railroad bubble of the day. After the J. Cook,
learn a lesson there with that, right? Like big companies and investment firms just throwing money at a wall to see what sticks. It's like It's not like I'm currently living through my fourth once in a lifetime financial crisis at 34 years old.
Mm-hmm. So after the J. Cook Bank fell, other banks soon followed, as did over 89 of the nation's 364 railroad companies. This had the net effect of nearly 14% of the U.S.'s workforce being out of work, compared to about 7.3% today, and as high as around 20 to 23% during the Great Depression. This all also saw real estate values plummet, further intensifying the problem. The New York stock market even had to be closed for over a week during the crisis. Amidst all this, Heinz, Noble and Company soon found themselves overextended as the Long Depression continued on, and they ultimately went bankrupt in 1875. After the business...
It's a fascinating period of American history, like the Depression and then the Great Depression, or just these periods of just wild economic downturn. I think I wrote one for you about the hyperinflation crisis in Germany post-World War I. And the thing that fascinated me about that is that, like, short version, after Germany lost World War I, you've got to pay back everyone for all the damage you did. And Germany's solution was to just print more money. Like, they removed themselves from the gold standard and then just printed more money and then used that money to buy foreign currency and use that to pay off their debt. And I could not believe when I researched that. I have to be misunderstanding this. I'm not like, is there an economist who can explain this? Like, no, their solution was to buy more money. He's like, that's a child's solution to the problem, right? Of like, well, how we need to pay our debtors. Why don't we just print a load of money and then use that money to buy more money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's I was talking to the CFO guy on another episode of the BrainFood Show, the CFO of Quincy, and we were talking about how the government works and government spending, and like what would happen if the U.S. defaulted on its debts? Like, it has just so much debt and it can't pay, right? And he was paraphrasing someone else, another economist, is like, who's gonna make us pay? I was like, oh. Well, and the from the more practical side of it too was that the U.S., because of the way some of the stuff works, people can go check out that episode. But you can always print money and pay it. You can pay the foreign entity in money that you printed and just wipe out the debt. But with various,
it's a bad idea because it causes inflation and then eventually hyperinflation. But I just couldn't believe that was a thing. That the solution was just to print and buy more money.
And you start doing stuff like that, and I'm sure that the other countries, then you can't lend. Entities are not going to want to lend money anymore, and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I just thought that one economist thing of who's going to make us pay. I was like, huh.
That is it is true, right? It's like, what's going to happen? I spoke about this yesterday. Of like, I'm in my house. I'm getting threatening letters for the previous tenant, who's just some Chinese guy who went back to China.
Yeah.
Like, he was a student and went back to China. And I just keep thinking, like, what are they going to do? They're not going to get him to pay that back, right? But they keep sending me letters assuming he still lives here.
Yeah.
And every time I call them up and it's like, do you know where he is? Probably China. I'm sorry, but I don't think you're getting that money back.
Yeah. After the business went belly up, Heinz didn't take long, though, to rebound, founding the H.G. Heinz Company just a year later in the midst of the Long Depression. And his new company pretty much did the exact same thing as his old bankrupted company did. But this one worked out a lot better. And I don't think I included it in this. I think it was in a bonus fact or something. But I thought one cool thing about Heinz, what he did there, because he had a lot of debts from his previous company. And he went ahead, and even though he had no obligation to pay those debts, over time with his new company, he actually paid back. He didn't need to, it was a completely separate company, entity out of the way, but he just felt it was the right thing to do. So as he got money, he slowly paid back those debts from the old company, that was kind of cool.
It's also as well probably a good way to get some pretty solid business connections, right? Because that's the kind of person where in the future, if you ask to lend more money, they're probably going to think, well, he paid back debt he didn't have to. Sure, we'll give that guy another line of credit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No point burning a bridge if you don't have to.
So this company worked out way better. By 1892, H.J. Heinz Company had grown from a small company selling horseradish in clear glass jars to having over 60 products. And despite having more than 57 products, at the behest of the founder of H.J. Heinz Company, the business instituted their now famous 57 varieties of Heinz slogan. So, Henry Heinz.
What is your favorite Heinz product then? Because I'm happy that the guy was just all in on his horseradish. I didn't realize he was that in on his horseradish, but I think Heinz ketchup is still the king, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. When I was originally researching this, I didn't really think I was really aware of how many products. Nowadays, there's thousands of things they make, it was ketchup. That's the thing. They make the best ketchup.
It's got to be Heinz, right? It's to the point where they have so much research and money being spent on marketing, because they realise that they are the de facto product when it comes to ketchup. Have you seen the thing they do with bottles? Where they have a red outline on the outline of Heinz bottles, and that is the exact same shade of red as Heinz. And if you look at a bottle in a restaurant or something, and it doesn't exactly match up, the ketchup in the bottle doesn't match up with the label, they've been refilling the bottle with a brand that's not Heinz, because they were aware of the fact that people were filling up bottles of Heinz and purporting it to be Heinz. Yeah, and it's just that's such an elegant solution to that problem, and it makes the customers all more aware, right? Mm-hmm. This company or this business might be trying to rip you off. If they're refilling a glass bottle of Heinz, what other corners are they cutting?
Going back to the 57 Heinz, why did he use 57? Henry Heinz had come up with the slogan while riding on a train in New York City in 1892. While on the train, he spotted a shoe store advertisement that was promoting their 21 styles of shoes, and he thought his company should have a similar slogan promoting the fact that they produce many different products. Rather than go with the exact number of products they made at the time, which would continue, and it's almost 6,000 products today, he instead chose 57. According to H.J. Heinz Company, he chose this number simply because he thought it was a lucky number and liked the sound of 57 varieties of Heinz. It was also reasonably close to the number of products that they actually produced at the time, so they went with it. And fast forward about 133 years later, and H.J. Heinz Company, which is now the Kraft Heinz Company after a 2015 merger, currently does over $26 billion in annual sales, which is crazy.
There's a lot of similar stories to that, though, when it comes to this is kind of what a business does. I think Domino's. Initially, their idea was the number of spots on the Domino's domino was going to be reflective of how many stores they had, which immediately just fell through when they opened up their 13th store, and they realized that was untenable, so they just picked 3, I think.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, I thought the funny thing with the Domino's too is that they were started by 2 brothers, and one of them, I think, when they were around their first, second, or third store, somewhere around there in the very beginning when they were first starting to think about expanding, the one brother traded his stake in the company to his other brother for a used Volkswagen Beetle. And then within, I think it was 10 or 15 years, the company was worth over $1 billion. And it's just like, think about the family get-togethers. It's like, hey, how's that Beetle running?
It's similar to like the story about Apple, right? Where there's the third founder, like Ronald Wayne, I think it was, where he sold his stake for $10,000. But he was less like salty about it because when he gets, I think you might have passed now, but when you get asked, like, are you upset that you like sold your stake? He's like, I'd be dead. I think he was like 30, 40 years older than like Jobs and Wozniak. And he's like, if I'd have worked at their pace, I'd have had a heart attack.
Yeah.
There was no way I could keep up with them. They were too young. The industry was too new. It was he was too advanced for this old brain.
He also he had a family and he was older. Like he couldn't afford to lose everything, which is what they were kind of putting on the line in it too. So yeah,
like a young man can take that risk, whereas a man, he had a lot more to risk and not as much to gain.
Yeah. Going back, one little bonus fact with the Heinz company. In 2013, Bernardo Hees became the CEO of Heinz after previously being the CEO of Burger King. The issue for Heinz in all this was that McDonald's did not like the former CEO of Burger King now being the CEO of Heinz, and so they promptly...
Is this why they stopped doing Heinz ketchup?
Yeah, they ended their business relationship with Heinz over the hire, with McDonald's official statement about it saying, as a result of recent management changes at Heinz, we have decided to transition our business to other suppliers over time.
I didn't know this, but just at some point I realised McDonald's ketchup sucks now. What's the deal? They used to do Heinz. Yeah. And that's why. They got mad.
Yeah, they didn't like, and I think at the time he was still like the vice president of something at Burger King. Like he transitioned from CEO to like vice president of something or other on the board or whatever. But yeah, and he was the new CEO of Heinz for, I think, until 2019 or something like that. If I remember
I've always wondered that because it made no sense that McDonald's would swap to a worse product because whatever their supplier their ketchup is now sucks.
I think it's
not as good.
It's like Fancy Ketchup or something like that is the brand. It was something like that. It had fancy in the name. But yeah.
I think the fact you can't remember what it is says it all, right? Heinz is a literal household name, whereas whatever McDonald's has, they don't even put it on the pump. They know the embarrass of it.
I believe he's, at his time at Burger King, really made some huge inroads in cutting into McDonald's market share where Burger King was kind of struggling. And so I think that might have been part of it. He was quite successful at starting to push McDonald's down. But
that's a business move, right? Of just
spiteful. We're not working with Heinz anymore.
The amount of business that's just informed by spite is incredible, right? Because you'd think like people who are just all about making money would be above such petty squabbles. There was the very famous story, I think Snopes have confirmed that it happened, where it's the guy who went into a bank and asked them to validate his parking, and they said no because he was dressed quite scruffily. Yeah. And it turns out he had like millions in the bank, and he was like some contracting company. So just because of the insult, withdrew all of his money right then and there and walked across the street. That's
always the thing is like you like to think. I think most people like to think like, oh, if I was like billionaire, super wealthy, I wouldn't do spiteful. I would be just nice to everyone. And it's like, but then you see like, I don't know, someone makes you mad. It's like that stereotypical on like Crazy Rich Asians. That movie is a great movie at the beginning when she comes in and they won't, and then so she just buys the hotel.
Walks outside, buys the hotel and walks back in. Oddly enough, thinking of like naming wise, there's a company over in the UK, JD Wetherspoons. It's like just a pub chain. It's known for doing very cheap food, but they are very successful to the point where there's one on every British high street. And the guy who owns it, Tim Martin, was asked, like, so why'd you call it JD Wetherspoons? And there was a teacher in school when I was in New Zealand who told me I'd never make anything in my life, and he was called Mr. Wetherspoon. So he named his successful pub chain after a teacher who told him he couldn't be a success. You've got to respect it, right? Just the pettiness.
So, moving on from Heinz to the main course. This is the story of Robert R. Taylor and why we all have, most people have a pump soap in our bathrooms. Robert R. Taylor is the name you've probably never heard of before, but this serial entrepreneur made his mark on the world of business by coming up with several products you are almost certainly very familiar with. And today, again, we're going to talk about the most boring of all on the surface, but actually not in liquid hand soap. Something you can thank Mr. Taylor and his freshly smelling balls of solid steel.
Was I wrong? Was I wrong about what
he went all in on it, and
the
it was
pump baron
brilliant
himself.
Yeah. So, but first, a little background on the man. Born in 1935, Taylor was destined to one day grace the covers of books with titles like The Greatest Business Decisions of All Time, consistently
That's
proving
not
himself...
hyperbole as well.
No. Yeah.
To be clear, there are books titled Greatest Business Decisions of All Time, and he's in there, I think, multiple times.
Yeah, he did some cool stuff, consistently proving himself to be not only a shrewd businessman, but a natural entrepreneur. For example, as a young man, Taylor is known to have made quite a few dollars by training a homing pigeon to fly to his home and then selling it to pet stores repeatedly. Education-wise, Taylor studied at both Miami University in Ohio and then Stanford Graduate School of Business, graduating from the latter with an MBA in 1959. Following this, he briefly... He briefly worked as a salesman at Johnson.
I forgot about the pigeon. That's such a good way to make money. Do you think it was the same store?
No, I mean,
he managed to fool them
twice.
Right? That's just so perfect. All I can think is the guy puts the pigeon in a cage and it immediately flies away. He's like, I'm not getting that back.
Seemingly every great entrepreneur starts by failing, and Taylor was no different. In 1963, starting a marketing company with a friend, this endeavor ultimately flopped, and Taylor decided to go it alone just a year later in 1964. And so it was, at the age of 28, he started a company initially run out of his garage called Village Bath Products with a $3,000 investment, about $24,000 today, he'd scraped together from the contacts he'd made in his short tenure working as a salesman for Johnson & Johnson. Not exactly successful right off the bat. When he first tried to sell his handmade soap to a couple dozen companies he had previously let's start that paragraph over.
Can we go for it? 'Cause it was my article. Maybe like the intonation and cadence is better suited for my reading out loud. I don't mind. I'll take the reins for a little bit.
Sure, here, go for it.
Okay, so not exactly successful right off the bat. When he first tried to sell his handmade soaps to a couple dozen companies he had previous business relationships with from his days with Johnson & Johnson, they all turned him down. Undeterred, he then got the idea to match his hand-rolled and cloth-wrapped soaps to towels, colour scheme and all. That got some companies interested and they started selling his product along with their bath towel sets. And this is like what made him just so genius to me. Of like and he'd talk about it, and it's mentioned later in the article, of spotting a gap in the market that a bigger company could fill, but otherwise didn't have the inclination to because it was too small for them to make profit from. But
but there was still a lot of money to be made in it. And he did that over and over again, where he just these things where there was a lot of money in these spaces, but it just it's sort of the the scraps of when you're talking like a big business like a Johnson & Johnson at the level they play at.
But the scraps from the table of a Johnson & Johnson is enough for an individual entrepreneur to earn a very, very comfortable living. So we move on. Village Bath Products, which was later rebranded as Minnetonka after a town near Taylor's home in Minnesota, continued to be extremely innovative in the soap market. While product commonly seen today, his various machinations were far more out there in his own day, which perhaps shouldn't come as a surprise coming from a man who purchased a hot air balloon so he could fly around on the weekends to advertise his soaps. Product that saw the New York Times describe him as a rapidly growing business with, and I quote, an offbeat company geared to hippies and people with luxury bathrooms, which seems like an oxymoron to me.
Yeah, it's completely two different groups, completely, seemingly.
So, notable soap products included, and these are all things I think sound awesome and I want them. Soap designed to look and smell like candy bars and pieces of fruits. That's presumably a thing that sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm. But also you can see the kids eating them and things.
Happened to me once when I was a younger kid. My brother handed me a bar of soap, told me it was chocolate. Yum.
It could have been worse. The things that your brother could hand you and claim it's candy or something, Yeah.
Yeah. I fell for that one of taking a big bite, and the worst bit was when my mum comes in later and just sees the bite mark out of the entire bar of soap. It's obvious what happened, but she needed an explanation and she was not happy with the result. But the other things he made included soap paint that kids could use to draw on themselves in the bathtub, and that sounds awesome as well.
That's brilliant too. You get kids to draw on their bodies while they're just washing themselves basically, but having some great fun with it.
Also as well lets you see as a parent, okay, have they put soap everywhere they need to clean? Mm-hmm. Similar to sunscreen for kids, where it tends to have it's a lot darker or just easier to spot on the skin, which allows you to tell if your child has got enough of it on everywhere. Because I remember being little, and it's you've got to make sure you get it everywhere. It's genius, right? But also that sounds super fun. Making bath time fun. I want that now as an adult. The other things he made were hand-rolled, scented, upscale soap balls packaged in decorative glass jars. Think the type of products that line the shelves of Bath and Body Works today, but before that type of product was common. His decision to go with offbeat soap products was primarily based on the fact that Taylor knew his company could never compete selling ordinary bathroom products, since established companies like Procter & Gamble, American Home Products, and even his former employer, Johnson & Johnson, basically dominate the entire market. As a result, his best hope for making money would be to sell products they wouldn't dare risk putting on shelves, capitalising on a niche demand they weren't satisfying. As Taylor himself would later state in an interview, and I quote, "The best way for an entrepreneur to compete in today's marketplace is to avoid competition, or at least find ways to circumvent it." And that's just... This is the dude, right? This is the guy they literally write about in business textbooks.
Well, because he was about to do it in the biggest way possible, like where he was making it so the competition could not, even if they wanted to, they couldn't do it because he had the market. But
he was the pump baron. So, of course, if a given product line took off, the large companies would inevitably copy the crap out of it, such as happened in the mid-1980s when he introduced Check-Up Anti-Plaque toothpaste and later bubblegum to the market, seeing them become wildly successful before ultimately the big boys swooped in and dominated with their version of the same basic twist on the product, forcing his into obscurity.
Most people in this, when that happens, most people will just sell their company to the big boys, but Taylor, he clearly did not no interest in that. He was seemingly just enjoyed the business part, so just wanted to keep going. So he kept having to pivot, though.
Yes, this saw Taylor having to stay extremely nimble and push for constant and rapid innovation. In keeping with his idea, Taylor often enlisted the help of his family, as one of his daughters, Laurie Lawrence, would note. And I quote, "It was normal for us to do brainstorming sessions at the dinner tables, come up with product names, to give him our evaluation of scents, consistencies and colours. My dad and I did all different kinds of formulations in the kitchen, night after night. They'd then test the product during the kids' bath time to see how it worked." What
a great way to teach your kids business, like just and get them involved in the company and sort of like you're all doing it together as a family. That's some good,
also,
good
as well,
fathering
just
right there.
Direct interaction with the customer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if he wants to sell soap that's like aimed at children, what better market research can you have than just, do the kids like it? Does this smell nice? I think to the amount of like products and stuff that fail because they just don't seemingly do any primary research on their target market. Like think to Apple. Do you remember a couple of years ago where the iPhone, if you held it in your hand, it would cut off the receiver?
Yeah, I remember that little...
Or the antenna.
Yeah.
And the story behind that is that, so I'm holding an iPhone now. Apparently everyone at Apple talked on their phone with speakerphone like this. Like they were on like The Apprentice or something like that. And it never occurred to anybody that someone might talk on their phone like a phone. And when you're talking like a phone, the heel of your palm covers up where they put the antenna. But just they never handed the phone to somebody and asked them to use it as a phone. So that thought never occurred to them. And they had to like release statements saying you're using your phone wrong. Right. Because they just didn't.
That always works out when you tell your customers that they're wrong.
Yeah, that's why Nokia stays winning. I love what they do with their phones. It's called the Gorilla Test, where after they've like tested the durability of their phones, this is why Nokia products are so like durable, is they just hand it to a guy and say, break it. And they also hand it to children and just let them throw it against walls and stuff like that to see all the points of failure that like, more stringent and specific tests might not account for. Anticipate a product's being used in a way that the customer might hold it, right? Because it's not going to be used and stored under optimal conditions. And why would you plan for it to be? Because that's just not realistic.
I also think one of the secrets to this guy's success, besides all that testing, is a quote that's coming up in just a little bit, where his just attitude on it all, which he has a quote at the end too about it.
Yes. So in regards to testing the products of his children, his daughter would recount that they'd spend most of their bath times like practicing how they worked. Said Laurie at the time they were trying to make puffy soap balls meant to be dropped in a bath. Some days they'd be too flat or they get too big and explode like popovers, which still sounds awesome. That's a bath bomb, right?
Yeah.
Undeterred when things didn't work out, she states he's simply saying, tomorrow's a new day. There's always a new formula.
That right there. I think that's like the key to his success. Just always keep pivoting, changing no matter what happens.
And staying positive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like tomorrow's a new day. It's like, I forget who it was who said it, but it might have been Edison or something, or it might have been a quote he stole of like, you found like that your product's failed 500 times. It's like, no, I've just found 500 ways it doesn't work.
Yeah. And that, if people want to go back and watch, I don't know if we published them all, but all the Edison episodes, that guy was the most positive he was just a likable person. I know he has this reputation online as being like this evil thing, and it's just not, it doesn't bear out at all when you really look into him. And just his personality, the way his workers describe him, but his personality, he was just relentlessly positive. And so many of his workers talk about that. They're like, I think that's the key to his success. Nothing discouraged him. Like no matter what bad thing, they have that one thing where their entire factory burns down and it cost him, he only had part of it insured. And instead of like freaking out about it or getting upset, he literally tells his son, go grab your mother, she'll never see a fire like this again, and just like come. And then he starts immediately talking about, well, we can rebuild the factory given all we've learned, like we can restructure things, put this here, that there, we can integrate Ford's new methods of like machine line type thing, and it was just like, that was just, he was just relentlessly positive always, no matter what. And it was great.
But also at the same time, it's probably why he was successful, right? Because he saw everything as an opportunity rather than a setback. That's something like Taylor embodied. So one idea from his family that Taylor apparently found particularly amusing was calling his company's brand of vintage style soaps Professor Taylor Soap. Taylor committed fully to the Professor Taylor guise in the early days of the company, hand delivering these soaps to department stores in a vintage Ford pickup truck to give his product an authentic feel. Also, he dressed like a professor with like a lab coat and glasses and stuff. Yeah,
he was, besides his positive thing and besides all that, he was also just like a great marketer.
Just keenly aware, right? You know, it's 90% of the product is what you tell the customer. Your first like taste with the eye. I think it's like when I worked in a restaurant and I learned from a sommelier about like selling wine to people. And he's talking about the secret is, if you know a little bit about wine, you know more than 99% of people. It's just about how you sell it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing, is like if you can sell it, it doesn't matter what it tastes like, because people, their perception of what it tastes like will be influenced by your sales tactic. The same way, like if you know a product is.
Yeah, wine does that better than most things, because it's like if you poured wine in a plastic cup, you know, like, and just serve it, it's the exact same wine, and just people's perception will be miles different than if it's in like a fancy glass at like a fancy restaurant and these sorts of things.
Exactly. Similar to like Taylor, right, where it's the same soap, but if I put it, like, you know, I spend like a couple of cents putting it in like a nice box, and I wrap it in like nice wrapping paper, and I put like this old-timey label on it, people are going to think that it looks it's more expensive than it is, right? It's like the thing about like what burger restaurants do, that of, it's like, okay, if we put the burger on a wooden board instead of on a plate, now it's fancy. If you put the fries inside like, you know, a container, you decant it into a container rather than just putting them on the plate, now it's fancy. You know, while Taylor though was essentially a machine at producing mildly amusing business anecdotes from his various exploits, his real marketing masterstroke was the now ubiquitous soft soap, which I think pretty much everyone watching this is going to have in their home in some way, shape or form. Mm-hmm. Not the specific product, but the type of thing where it's like just liquid soap, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Even the brand is still pretty popular today.
And we'll find that out. So while the product was conceived in the late 70s by Taylor while driving to work and contemplating why anybody put up with bar soap. Said Taylor, I thought how ugly bar soap is, and how it usually messes up the bathroom. There had to be a better way to wash your hands. That's the thing, I've used bar soap, and it isn't great, because you wash your hands and you put it down, and you have to have a specific place to put the soap. So you have to have a soap dish, which also gets dirty, which you also have to clean. The soap gets like dirty because if people have dirty hands, and you have to clean your soap. Well,
yeah, that's what I was going to say, too. If it's sitting in the bathroom or whatever, it's getting, every time you flush the toilet or this, it's getting all sorts of microbes on it, which is, that's actually, it can be a problem with refillable liquid soap at public restrooms. I forgot to put it in here, but I did one on that one time, and it was something like 25 times the amount of bacteria on your hands after you use the soap, if it's refillable. Yeah. If it's not, if it's a sealed from the factory, and then that's, you're good. You're going to come out way ahead. But if it's a refillable one at a public bathroom, it's not good.
I'm reminded of it's like a Reddit post asking people who work in specific industries of what's some like dirty secrets people maybe don't know, and it's the people who refill coffee machines. So there's like gas station coffee machines. It's like, never get a latte or a cappuccino, because I guarantee you they're not cleaning the milk spout out. Now they might replace the milk, put fresh milk in. They're not cleaning the lines or passing like boiling water through it to sterilize the pipes, because why would they? It's especially gas stations, like 24 hours, they ain't got time.
That's also always the one with people who work at cleaning the soft serve ice cream machines always say the same thing. It's like, don't. Yep. If you do that, you're not going to want to buy a soft serve ice cream again.
It's why the McDonald's ones are always broken. The meme about McDonald's ice cream machines always being broken is because they clean them, but they just say it's broken because cleaning would make it sound like it's not clean, even though it technically is. But it's like, it's dairy And you need to clean ice cream machines very thoroughly.
Yeah, and regularly, or they get really nasty really fast.
But they're instructed to say broken rather than cleaning, because cleaning would suggest to someone that it was unclean to start with, and that's just a negative association you don't want in your mind. Which is a fun little marketing quirk. But whilst liquid soap products were a thing going all the way back to 1865, first patented by a guy called William Shepherd, though in the patent noting this was an improved liquid soap, implying a similar product was already a thing, this wasn't something you typically find in people's homes, and most people just used bar soap. Why? Well, because despite the fact forms of liquid soap dispensers have been around since 1919, when one G.H. Honsbein patented a wall-mounted version, still used in some way, shape or form to this day, no company had thought to put liquid hand soap in a container that would make it convenient for use domestically. It's just Taylor's raison d'etre, right? It's just gap in the market. Why is nobody doing this? So to enter Taylor and his soft soap, which is essentially the first mass-produced liquid hand soap ever sold to the public, all packaged in a convenient bottle featuring a pump. The key problem with this idea, though, is that while revolutionary in some ways, no single part of the idea was originally to be patented. Therein lies the problem. From his previous experience having bigger companies copy his ideas not long after he made them successful and then take over the market using their improved market clout and corporate war chest, Taylor knew that if this one worked out, they'd once again swoop in and use their clout to bully his product off store shelves. While this was good for some of his products, he'd make a quick buck and then just move on to his next idea. Once he was forced out of the market, he saw soft soap as being something that could take his fledgling company to the next level. But how to keep it all for himself? And this is just, it's my favourite thing.
Well, because it's not just a brilliant thing, but he also had to go all in, like financially, and just do it at a pretty extreme level. Like this is, the company's either done or we're gonna be super wealthy after.
Yes. So his one advantage of the bigger companies is that they were always a little slow to come out with their own copycat products, needing to do all sorts of things like market testing and run things through the various chains of command. As Taylor would note, many large consumer product companies get caught up in structure, research and justification. They're always trying to do a thorough job of risk analysis. When they get all the facts together, though, they find that they can do away with the risks and often end up either doing nothing or moving very slowly. And so he came up with an ingenious and rather ballsy two-stage plan. So stage one, launch soft soap and essentially leverage every dime he could come up with to advertise it, investing a whopping $7 million, about $21 million today, probably a bit more, his articles from like 5 years ago, on a countrywide ad campaign for his new product to get his brand to be the one everyone associated with liquid hand soap. To put this in perspective, this was almost as much money as the largest soap manufacturer of the day, Dial, spent on advertising every single one of their products combined. To put it further in perspective, Taylor's entire company at this point had a net worth of $8 million.
Yeah.
Just every penny.
Well, and for the next stage too, he had to come up with an even larger sum to implement stage two.
On to stage two, which, if it wasn't successful, would have seen him essentially spend every penny he had, basically to create a new market for his competitors to just walk into ready-made. So before launching soft soap, Taylor had made a crucial observation. There were only a few companies in the United States that made the kind of pumps needed. Of these companies, only one produced enough pumps suitable for mass production on the scale being envisioned. And since there wasn't much in the way of a suitable international company that would be able to provide what was needed quickly and at a competitive price, in effect, this left a single choice for anyone wanting to sell liquid soap en masse using such a pump system. Thus, Taylor's idea was simple. Buy literally every single pump the company had available for the foreseeable future. How many would he need to buy? 100 million to keep the company, Kalmar, busy at full capacity for 12 months straight.
Yeah.
It sounds so simple, but yeah, just buy them all.
As he get into soon, like he also has to convince the company and come up with the money to do it.
Yes, he did. So the problem is that he didn't have the required $12 million, about $40 million today, to place such an order. So he had to wait until the product was launched and hope that it was a big enough hit to give him the money he needed before his competitors decided to make their copycat version. So there's like a golden window where he could use the profits made from the initial sales to then buy out the entire order.
Mm-hmm.
Which must have been nerve-wracking, right? Like, he's sitting on what he knows to be a gold mine.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just got to hope that the big lumbering dinosaur companies that try to compete with him will just take too long to realise how lucrative it could be.
Yeah, especially when he's pouring so much money into advertisements, so they're well aware, and they're probably watching to see how much he's pushing into it. So,
yes. So, when the time came, he also had no way of knowing whether or not Karl would agree to the contract. If Karl didn't, there was a very real risk of a bigger company that they would eventually sign a contract with them, and they would do what Taylor was attempting to do to everybody else: shut him and everybody else out by just buying all of the pumps. And while you might think agreeing to a massive contract that would essentially see them working at full capacity for the foreseeable future would be a no-brainer for a company, consider that this would force them to get rid of all their other business contracts to service one relatively small company. And if his business went bankrupt or belly up, they're sat on 100 million pumps that they can't sell because they're already earmarked for somebody else, right? When the time came, though, Karl agreed. Naturally, this sequence of events has gone down in history as one of the most ballsy, and I quote, bet the company moves ever, only perhaps outdone by FedEx founder Frederick W. Smith taking the company's last $5,000 or so to Vegas and turning into $32,000 gambling.
Yeah, I love this one. You'd think he would have gotten some legal trouble if he just lost it all, but yeah, he didn't care. He was just going for it.
At that point, this is an addition you added, Daven, so if you'd like to take it from here.
Sure, yeah. In a nutshell on this one, the $5,000 in liquid cash FedEx had at the time was insufficient to cover even the fuel to fuel their planes, and a last-ditch effort for outside investment with one General Dynamics failed. So he took a trip to General Dynamics headquarters, he pitched it to him, they turned him down. It was the weekend was coming, Monday. They did not have enough money to fuel the planes to actually ship the packages, so they were done, basically. He needed more time to buy more time to try to find somebody else to just give them some cash that they could keep operating. So thus, the weekend after his failed pitch, instead of taking a flight home to Memphis after the meeting, Smith took the $5,000 and flew to Las Vegas and played blackjack that weekend with the remaining company funds. And by Monday, to the shock of the other higher-ups in the company, FedEx had $32,000 in its bank account, which was just enough to cover the fuel for their planes and to continue operating a few days more. When asked what he'd been thinking, taking a chance like that with company funds, he stated, "What difference does it make? Without the funds for the fuel companies, we couldn't have flown anyway."
It's a good point, right? It's like, why did you do that? We didn't have enough money anyway, right? It was either we fail and do nothing, or we take a risk. A literal, it's just, in this case, the gamble was literal.
Yeah, a little gambling. And so it turns out a few days more is needed because the next week he successfully managed to raise $11 million to keep the company afloat. And within a couple of years, Federal Express made its first profit of $3.6 million. 4 years after that, the company's profits were up to nearly $40 million with gross revenue near $500 million. And they haven't really looked back today, worth over $50 billion.
Still, they needed just that Band-Aid on their finances, just get them through that next week.
Another interesting thing about FedEx is it started as it was in college and he had to write some sort of paper on something. I can't remember the details of what the exact assignment, but he wrote a paper like designing a company like this that could get packages anywhere, his idea anywhere in the world in like a day. Like it could be done if someone, and he sort of designed it for the college paper and then later got some investment and actually started the company.
Yeah, it reminds me in a way of like just someone who had like a really great idea. I think it was like a singer, or I think it was the drummer for a band, like some Seattle-based band. And they were advised when they got their first like big paycheck from an album sale, like, oh, you should invest it. So they decided to invest in some local companies. They invested in one that sold coffee, one that sold computers, and one that dealt with packages and delivery. And they were like, it was Amazon, Starbucks, and Apple.
Yeah.
And they ended up being the richest member of the band. It's like, just pick these three random companies that are fledgling. There's so happens to be Apple, Amazon, and Starbucks. It's
always fascinating, too, speaking of packaging and stuff like that with computers, with the early days of computers. So the wallpaper, the little fun stuff. So the bubble wrap that we use for packaging stuff and protect packages, and that was originally invented to be the inventors. They wanted to make wallpaper out of it. So that was their idea. Nobody wanted it for wallpaper. And then I think it was IBM came out with one of their early computers, and they got the idea, wait a minute, what if they need to ship those things. What if we wrapped it in our wallpaper, which is just bubble wrap? And then the company took off from there.
There's a lot of devices like that. They were invented for another purpose, but someone just used them in a way they didn't expect, right?
Yeah, Play-Doh is another one where it was originally to clean off the soot from coal. Everybody used coal fire, and you had to clean it off your wallpaper, speaking of that. But then, of course, as people moved away from using coal to heat, they needed another use for their product. And it was I think it was the sister-in-law of one of the things. She was a teacher, And she was like, she used it. She was like, we use it for play. The kids like to play with it, like modeling clay, basically. And they went from there.
And thus Play-Doh was born, right?
Yeah.
It's similar to like, or device or inventions that don't work properly. I remember that's how like Post-it notes became a thing. A guy was trying to invent a new super glue, and his glue sucked. It didn't stick to anything. But then he realised, I think it was a guy in a church was using it to stick like prayer sheets into Bibles, but then pull them back out. Mm-hmm. And then he realised there's a benefit to having something that sticks, but can be removed without leaving any residue. And thought about like the Post-it notes.
Well, and that one too, that one was interesting because it was a 3M, I think it was them. They were using it internally for a long time, but like the execs just didn't think there was a marketable product here. But even though internally they were using it constantly, and then finally they did a test run in Idaho or something like that. I think it was initially not doing well, but then they did some sort of marketing pitch where they had to show people what you could do with it because it wasn't even on their radar. And then once they did, then it just skyrocketed, and they,
it's just such a great idea. I have them in my house. I use them for like when I decant stuff. Like, okay, I open this on like June 5th, done. Mm-hmm. Saves like having to write on stuff, right? I just like when I'm working, I was like, this meeting today, I had a thing of just like, okay, this is what I'm recording. When I'm looking at my computer, I know I've got meetings coming up. Anyway, getting back to soft soap, just as Taylor had planned when the larger companies tried to release their own take on soft soap, they realised they couldn't because some mysterious, freshly smelling, well-endowed individual had called dibs on almost every suitable pump in the United States to be produced for the next 12 months. And here's the pro tip. You can always tell when you're reading for one of my articles because I always put a joke in like that.
Inevitably.
That goes all the way back to my days at Cracked, where just you have to describe someone as having just like steel-plated balls for these things, right? Like the guy did. He bet his entire company. He bet everything he had. And he paid off. And well done him for doing so.
I always like that too. I always felt like these scripts, your scripts, they meshed well because I enjoy that like straight-faced humor where you're just saying something a little zany, ridiculous. Which you do a lot. Yeah, like ridiculous. And sometimes, like when I host them, like Simon used to cut out a lot of those because they were a little too out there. And now that I host a lot more, I just leave them in, and it does variously. I think because when you come to a place like the Onion or Monty Python, you're gonna get something really zany. Mm-hmm. But when you come to like Today I Found Out, you're kind of getting this serious, and then just straight face, most absurd thing you've ever heard for like 2 sentences, and then right back to the main thing. But I don't know. I feel like it adds a lot, but it also, I think it's jarring for some people. Like, what? Like, what just happened?
It was inspired by you though, because when I first started writing for you, you told me you need at least 3 interesting things in each paragraph. So one of the ways I do that is it's the classic joke-telling format, right? Of like normal thing, funny thing.
Yeah.
That's how you tell a joke, right? Or if I write hyperbole.
Yeah.
Right. The last thing in a list of 3 is normally the one that's surprising to grab people's attention after the sentence has been done.
Yeah.
So like with that one where this article talk about, he did various things. He'd sell stuff to his neighbours, and then the pigeon right at the end just to grab your attention. But the way that these scripts go is that you hear the pigeon and then you're already reading. You saw it happen to me when I burst out laughing. I couldn't respond.
Yeah. And I think it works. I think it also works if you build it, like, because sometimes on them we can get pretty absurd by the end. But if you build it small, like you start a little small thing, like there's the classic one where we have on why you can't mix blood types in different people. And we start out, there's this like person named Jimmy, and we're just like being like slightly mean to him. We're like sort of insinuating that we don't like Jimmy, but like in the blood thing. And then by the end, we're peeling Jimmy's skin off, but like it just sort of blends into the rest of the thing. And it sounds absurd, but if people go watch it, and finally broke Simon on that one, when at the end, when he gets to the peeling his skin off, he just broke and it's like, what is even happening here? But you build up to it. You build up to it. And you can bring the audience along. It's when I think sometimes when we'll hit them with the joke too far out there too quickly, and people aren't used to it. Whereas like if you go to the Onion or something, which is one of the best, and their YouTube channel is great. Again, they've started redoing their really good videos, and they just like they can say the most absurd thing of all time right in the first sentence, and it's just what you're getting when you come to it.
I'm also a fan of like the understated sentence that just really undersells like what happens. I wrote one for you recently. And in it, I discuss the habits many people have of engaging in acts of criminal mischief where they draw a penis on something. And I tracked down a story from some people who broke into an amateur football ground, stole all of their uniforms, used their chalk runner to draw a 5-foot-long penis on like their goal line. And just as a quote from one of the guys involved, like, I don't know why they did this. And just something about the guy stood there like, I don't know why they did this. I found very amusing.
That's the stereotypical like British, like the extreme understatement. Like, oh, like we talked about, I think it was in the last one. It's like, oh, my leg, I think my leg blew off. Like, you know.
Yes.
Well,
but just,
by God, sir, I think it did.
It's a good bookend to like this just really unserious series of like things that happened to his team. Like they broke in, they stole their uniforms, they stole the goalposts, and then drew a giant penis on the field in chalk runner just for the insult. And just, what's the quote to sum it up? I don't know why anyone would do this. The headline that I had to quote is just, players of the two teams are worried that there might be too many balls on the pitch on game time on Sunday. It's a time-honoured British tradition of covering like local interest stories and trying to write a funny headline. Like one of the most famous ones is when they found like a World War II like unexploded ordnance on a beach, and just it's a headline. I think it gets singled out as like the single greatest British headline because it's just the understatement is so real of shell found on beach. It's perfect, right? So getting back to soft soap, with literally zero competition to speak of during that period, soft soap, understandably, and quickly cornered the entire market, seeing Minnetonka bring in excess of $25 million, about $100 million today within 6 months of product launch, about double their former total sales across their entire series of product lines during the previous 6 months. Within 2 years of a launch, sales for the company had risen to over $100 million, about $390 or $400 million today, and saw the stock price of the company multiply an incredible 15-fold. Not bad. A year. 1 year, our stock price gone up 15 times.
That's insane. It's also because it's not like an industry you'd think. It's soap. Like you wouldn't think, but there's a great book. I cannot remember the name of it. It's by some Stanford business professor.
Media, right?
Where he was talking about like the top companies. Was Good to Great, I think is the one. He's talking about these companies that go from just like, they're good, solid, big companies, and then they skyrocket. And the ones, and so many on the list were ones you wouldn't even think like were the dominant force during this decade or whatever. And like Walgreens was one of them. And it was in a time when you'd think Walgreens would be, as online sales were going up, Walgreens would be going away. And no, they were just like crushing all these major tech companies, everything like with their stock, overflow. And it's just like, wow. Like, yeah. And how'd they do that?
People always need soap.
Yeah.
Right. There's a couple of like, they're not too serious, but they can be used to track like general market trends, right? And one is the sale of men's underwear. It's like you can generally track how good the economy is doing based on whether or not men are buying new underwear. And then the other one is the hem length of skirts. But generally, like when the economy is doing better, shorter skirts are generally like the done thing. Or it might be the other way around. Like you might be doing materials. Like it's not 1-to-1, but there's a couple of those. It's like
fascinating that there's a correlation at all.
Just like the male underwear one makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
If the economy is not doing well or you're not getting paid a lot of money, underwear are literally the last thing I care about. No one sees them.
Yeah, well, even shirts. Like I feel like for
them.
guys, like even with their shirts, it's like, this T-shirt from 20 years ago is still good.
Yeah. But, we get back to Minnetonka now. So they estimated that when competitors finally caught up, they'd still retain about 50% of the emerging total liquid soap market, which they tentatively valued as being worth about $400 million long term. However, although the liquid soap market did prove to be as profitable as Minnetonka predicted, after their monopoly on pumps ended, their market share shrank to less than 30% when some 100 plus competing products launched. This is Robert Taylor we're talking about though. So through a variety of marketing stunts, as putting 1.5 ounces less soap into the bottle to allow him to lower his price compared to those using the standard 9-ounce bottles, soft soap slowly managed to claw its way back to number one in the market. Finally, after about 7 years after launch, he sold soft soap to Colgate Palmolive for $61 million, about $171 million today. And then 2 years later, he sold off the rest of his company to Unilever for about $376 million, nearly $1 billion today. And the reason he was able to do that is because he bought Calvin Klein's fragrance product line for $1 million 9 years earlier and made it successful when he did the exact same thing marketing-wise when he promoted Obsession. That's like slightly before my time, but it was still getting referenced in like stuff like The Simpsons and sitcoms years later, like the advertising, like Obsession for men, right? People still quote that, although not as much as they did. And yeah, that was him again.
And I like his quote on that one, where like in a lot of his other stuff, it was just, he was just a genius for what he picked up. And in this one, he just says, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. Even a blind squirrel finds the nut.
Yes, and I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Like that approach. Like, I always contend any success I've achieved online can be attributed to luck. Right place, right time. Or the other one in like business is it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Well, and I think
Right?
also,
For example,
it's
I know
also,
you. I was,
yeah, it's also the fact that you were putting stuff out there, and it's like I think that's such a huge like 90%. It's like that 90% is just showing up, just show up, and then even if you suck like or good or whatever, you'll get better at every time, and your stuff is out there and that has definitely been my model as well. Is just showing up online, and then like and if people would go back and read, and probably don't do this, but in like 2009, my first articles. And you're just like, this person has no future in writing. They don't know how to write. They don't know how to research. It just, every part of this sucks, like literally. And then
there's something there though.
Yeah, but then you just keep doing that, and then eventually you don't suck, like to an extent, and then you get more stuff out there, and like hire people. Like 2 years later, hired you, and like it all comes together eventually.
Yeah, it's or to sum up, one of my favorite quotes. I use it all the time. Just throw shit at a wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. That's exactly
right? But you've got to throw it at first, right?
That's our model even with videos. We throw so many random topics out there, and I don't know if you feel the same, but I have like a sense of what's going to do well, but I would say probably 30 or 40% of the time I'm just completely wrong. Sometimes both ways. One, I think this is going to do amazing, and then it does nothing, and then otherwise it's like, really, that one? Like that's what
you can never predict trends.
Yeah.
You can try to, but just some things will pop off without any rhyme or reason, and that's why I attribute a lot of my success to luck. Because just at one point, after I think a years of making content, one video just was swallowed up by the algorithm, got like 100,000 views in the space of 12 hours, and from that I managed to build up my company. Same with like how I came to contact with you, writing articles, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and then just one day got an email in my inbox from you, just saying, "Hey, do you want to submit stuff for me?" Took that opportunity. And then if you go back, like the reason I was writing those articles, you can follow that all the way back of me just taking opportunities because they were presented, and it's the same for a lot of people, I imagine. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut. I like that one.
Yeah.
And I do have to share this fact though, because I found this out as the bonus fact. So speaking of animals, Calvin Klein's obsession for men is sometimes used by photographers to attract big cats like jaguars, leopards, tigers, lions, and the like. According to the Wildlife Conservation Society, the cats go crazy for it, and zoos will even use it to keep their big cats in more visible areas of their cages during business hours.
So it really does attract the kitties.
I was gonna pitch that to you, and I don't think I ever did, but yeah, I would love to write a script on like perfume attracting lions.
Yeah. I don't think that's like what you want, that you want to go for. Like if you ever go on safari or something, like obsession for men out there.
Like my dad's going on safari next week.
Really?
Like he's going all the way to like
Africa
a
real safari. That's amazing.
Yeah, and he's got like the list of things he's not allowed to do, and said, "Do not wear aftershave. Do not wear aftershave." And he asked why, and it's like, "You will get attacked by a lion." Would you walk into a lion enclosure just like covering yourself in barbecue sauce? No, don't do it.
Or like catnip or something.
Yeah. Bring it back to Taylor. After selling off the company, he started with a mere $3,000 for a combined almost $1 billion when adjusted for inflation. He retired for, to quote Tim, 2 minutes, starting other extremely successful companies, including high-end salon products company, Graham Webb International, and Monterey Bay Clothing Company. Father Time catch up to all men though, however, and his business activities finally ended with his death from cancer at the age of 77 in 2013, sorry. On his climb from nothing to literally a member of the Entrepreneurship Hall of Fame, Taylor will sum up the adventure that is starting companies. Each one gets easier, but it's never easy. He also sagely noted, 10% of the success of a new consumer product is the idea, 90% is the execution. That means positioning the product, marketing, strategy, and creativity. As for making such a plan work, he notes, success is a matter of attitude, as we've discussed, right? It's just positive mindset.
Yeah. Always adjust. Because it is like anytime you're running a business, there's always like it seems like these huge peaks and then huge valleys. And, it just, if you have the wrong attitude of the deep valleys, you probably just go do something else,
Yeah, it was a really great, it's like a pseudo documentary by the magician / mentalist / illusionist Darren Brown. And it's about luck. And he posits that luck is just a state of mind. Like it's not a tangible thing in counseling, it's just positive thinking, realised. And he does a series of experiments on this small town. And he just puts a statue of a dog in the town and starts a rumour via like a television documentary, or purported to be a television documentary, about the lucky dog. And over the course of like a couple of months, like the citizens of a town start talking about how they've experienced like good things as a result of petting the dog. And there's a great moment where there's this guy, he interviews a bunch of people, like, do you consider yourself to be lucky? And one guy he finds, he's like, no, I'm not lucky. And Darren argues, it's like, is it that he's unlucky, or is it that he's just not recognising opportunities? So what he does, he engineers situations where he would be lucky. Like, for example, he sends him like a thing in the post of like, you've won a TV. And the guy just throws it away as like junk mail. Then there's an interviewer on the street doing a questionnaire. The guy's a butcher. They're asking about cuts of meat. He would have won 20 quid. And it's to the point where like Darren's like, he puts £50 on the ground on his way to work and he walks straight past it. And then it gets to the point where he just gets a truck, writes the guy's name on it and puts his face, says, call this number. And he doesn't. Yeah,
that's it. That's the mindset thing. There's a book called Mindset. I think it's Dr. Carol Dweck or whatever when it talks. And I think you see this in this positive mindset in Taylor here is so it's that the sort of the, I mean, there's a lot to it, but the heart of it is like the people who see the failure or the work as the challenge and not so much looking at the reward of the end thing, but it's actually the work itself, like the challenge that comes is like, all right, this is and just having that positive mindset of like, I can figure this out like in time, like I suck at it now, but I'll figure it out or whatever. And just the people who have that just go, they learn better, faster, they adjust, they adapt to things. I mean, there's a ton of the book. It's a really good book if people want to go read it, but there's a ton to it. But it is, I think, and he's exhibiting that in spades, I feel like.
It's great as well because one of the best bits about that documentary is when Darren Brown confronts that guy and he sits him down and he shows him step by step, these are all the opportunities you missed. And when you see the guy slowly realise, because obviously it's just this is a microcosm, like 3 or 4 decisions, but you see the guy, it dawns on him how many similar moments in his life have passed him by because he had a negative attitude. And you see it dawn on him that he might have wasted his entire life. And in the end,
he's having an existential crisis right on screen.
He does, on camera. And what Darren Brown does, he says, I'm going to see who's the luckiest person in this town. I'm going to throw some dice. What are people willing to bet on one roll of dice? And that guy bets his entire life savings. Because he's so like changed by the experience. He's like, I'm going to bet my entire life savings. I spent my entire life being negative, and I won't spoil what happens, but I'd recommend.
The funny part is if he loses,
well, you have to go watch it. But just the moment where you see the guy, it dawns on him of like he's been just negative his entire life, and you can see him thinking, how many other opportunities have passed me by because I've just not recognised them as opportunities. Fascinating, right?
So
applies to life as well as business. But
yeah, moving on.
Dessert.
Yeah, dessert, which is going to be a literal dessert this time. What we're going to be talking about, another great entrepreneur who went from nothing to one of the heights of success in business, and a business that I don't know if they still have it around. Do you have Dunkin' Donuts in Europe at all, or Britain? Or?
Yes.
Really?
We do have Dunkin' Donuts. It launched a couple of years ago. I've got big respect for Dunkin' Donuts because the few times I've been to the States, one thing that I always shout out to my friends is the availability of just iced coffee. Just black iced coffee, lots of ice in a big container, and you can get it for like $1 in some places. We don't have that in the UK. We have Starbucks, but iced coffees come like little containers. It's like no, and it's like £4 or £5. But when they launched Dunkin' in the UK, you can get the similar size, like big, just plain iced coffees, no sugar, no syrup. Because I hate when you try and get like iced coffee or canned coffee, they always put sugar in it. Just nice big old a litre of iced coffee for a couple of quid.
Going back to the start of it all, in 1847, at the tender age of 16, Seaman Hanson Gregory looked at some frying dough and said, everything is better with holes. Except a ship hole, probably, and created the staple of breakfasts the diabetes-loving world over, the donut. Or so the story goes anyway. In truth, Captain Gregory's account of how and why he supposedly invented the donut varied over time, and despite a literal statue being made of him in Rockport, Maine in 1947, commemorating his fried genius, nobody really knows where the whole donut came from, and it almost certainly didn't come from him, as we get into it in a second.
It's one of those classic tall tales, right? But it's something I've encountered a lot when researching articles for the site. Is just there are these stories that sound great, but that's not how it went down. But the actual explanation is usually just a little bit more complex than people would necessarily like, and as a result, people tend to prefer the shortened, less accurate version.
Yeah, exactly. And people like as we get into the very probable actual origin of the donut with a hole in the middle, people like the human story, that someone you can latch on to Captain Gregory and not just like it just made business sense the way we were marketing product. Like so some, including Captain Gregory, claim
that moment, like the Newton with the apple, right? Just that spark of genius. It's a very common trope. People do like just that instant moment of realization, the eureka moment with Archimedes, right, jumping in the bathroom.
Whereas like everything
in the bath, sorry.
Yeah, everything is more of like an evolution and these sorts of things. And so some, including Captain Gregory, claim putting the hole in it makes it so you don't get a mouthful of grease when you eat the center. But the fact is that plenty of donuts have existed and still exist that have no holes with no such issue, and people have been frying up such cakes for millennia with no apparent inclination to take the center out, except for occasionally to replace it with things like fruit and other fillings. Nevertheless, it was in the late 19th and early 20th century that suddenly many decided a hole should be present in such fried dough. So as to why, the more probable reason, the timing of the change gives arguably the best hypothesis, or at least potentially why it became popular. Around the same time donuts with holes first popped up in New York City, bagels were also becoming very popular in the same place and were commonly put on display and sold stacked on wooden dowels. Thus, it is sometimes hypothesized that bakers in New York first got the bright idea to put holes in the dough before frying, when one or more of them thought to sell the donuts in the same way as bagels, on dowels, which saved display space and, perhaps more significantly, made it easier to sell in mass on street corners, which they used to do. With that hypothesis, making more evenly fried dough may or may not have come into play, but it just, if you're a little street vendor, you don't have a lot of counter space, so they were selling bagels this way, so decided to start selling donuts that way.
I've got to give a shout out as well. So donuts, like they're seen as an American thing, but I grew up like a very working class neighborhood, and we'd go to a very working class seaside town, and one of the highlights is they would sell 10 donuts for £1, and they were the most awful greasy donuts you've ever had, but they would just put an entire packet of sugar on them. They were awful, but it's just such a fond memory of just how disgusting those donuts were.
That's always the thing with donuts. I always feel like I go through these cycles of like, I feel like I'm going to like a donut, right? And so then I'll have a donut and I'm like, this tastes good. And then afterwards I feel gross because it's like all grease, and like everything. And then I just won't have a donut again for like a year or two. And then I'll be like, I'll come around again. Like, it's going to be good this time. And
I think the problem with donuts is donut technology is progressing beyond the need for donuts. Like 90% of people that I've encountered just prefer the regular glazed donut, right? They don't need to put all the fancy stuff on, they keep trying. Like, I've seen many pop-up shops in the city I live in rise and fall, try to do like the gourmet donut that have like an entire candy bar on them or something like that. And without fail, they always just go out of business because people will buy it as a novelty and then don't buy it again. So that seems like Dunkin' Donuts. People just buy the donut holes or the single glazed donut because it's just...
It's the same with muffins. There was that fad for a little while of like muffin stores everywhere, and then there's no muffin stores now because,
people just like, we've sold, it's like cookies, right?
Yeah.
Chocolate chip, double chocolate chip, triple chocolate chip, done. There's not much more you can do to improve that recipe.
So whatever the case with the invention of the donut, this wholly fried dough rapidly gained in popularity in the early 20th century, particularly receiving a huge boost thanks to World War I and soldiers' love of them in the trenches. This all leads us to the literal dessert topic of the day. That time, a junior high dropout might as well have put a hole in people's pockets with how fast they started throwing money at him when he created one of the most successful franchise businesses in history, the Open Kettle, which nobody's heard of because he later realized that was a horrible name for his company, and after a brainstorming session with his employees, he rebranded, and this is now the story of the Massachusetts native William Rosenberg and how he went from dropping out of school in the 8th grade to creating the multi-billion-dollar behemoth Dunkin' Donuts. This one was originally sponsored by the Quincy, Massachusetts.
Was it sponsored by Dunkin'?
No, Quincy, which was that's where they were. Quincy, Massachusetts is where it was founded. This was one of the first. We've had a long-standing sponsorship with them. They are my favorite sponsor, and we were just talking beforehand. Next year, we're going to be going out and doing a panel there on teaching history in an interesting way. It's going to be super cool, but they're a great group. You're going to see when you go out there, like the biggest group of history nerds, and just I love the type of stuff they have. A sponsor is not necessary. It's a little more niche, but it's like stuff we couldn't cover normally because it's a more niche, but it's like really good, interesting topics that are just some of the best stuff. Like if people want to go read or go watch. We have a 5-part series, the Hancock series on Hancock's life. Yeah, it's a 5-part video series on John Hancock, and it sounds like that's not going to be interesting, but I'm telling you, it is one of the best things I've ever written, and like just the whole arc of the story is really good. And it was a rare case where it was originally just supposed to be one video, and when I wrote it, I was like, this isn't very good, and so I was like, I don't like this. And you'd think making it 5 videos would make it less good. Surely making it longer would make it worse, but no, that's where it got interesting, is when I made 5 videos out of it. But yeah,
it's the research classic, right? You've no doubt experienced it, just falling down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's exactly what it became. Like the surface story of John Hancock, it's significant and way more significant than most people think, like for world history, because he's even in American history, he's mostly forgotten other than his signature. But when
he's
you
the big one, right?
Yeah,
Everyone knows him. He just has the giant signature on the Declaration of Independence.
But when you actually go for the whole story arc of his life in the American Revolution, it's so good. Like, it's really interesting. It's just fascinating from start to finish. And they sponsored all 5 of those, and just because they're good and they're interesting, and they're just, they're never going to get the views of some of our others that have more like mass appeal. But if people want to go watch it, the John Hancock series, super good. It's a 5-part video series. And so, yeah, like working with them, and they originally sponsored this one. So moving on from there. Born on June 10th, 1916 in Boston, Massachusetts, to Jewish immigrants Nathan and Phoebe Rosenberg, at the age of 13, William Rosenberg decided academic pursuits were far less appealing when there was no food on the table. You see, at the time, his father's grocery store became one of the many casualties of the Great Depression. Needing to help support his family, the newly minted teen entered the workforce, taking a variety of jobs in ensuing years, everything from shining shoes to snow shoveling. He even, on particularly hot days, would buy blocks of ice and sell ice chips at the racetracks. But things really began looking up for the young entrepreneur when, at the age of 14, he landed a full-time gig as a message runner for Western Union, with his starting wages reportedly approximately $95 a month, which is about $1,500 today, plus tips. A few years later, at the age of 17, he switched to working for Jack and Jill Ice Cream, initially as a delivery boy, but within a decade, rising all the way up to national sales manager at the company.
Yeah, that's like the sign of success, right? There's like meteoric rises through the company. One I think to recently is like Nike. I think they're like someone really hyping them up, like the CEO or something. People were pointing out that his LinkedIn page, you see him start at like junior, like copywriter or something, and just over the course of like 15 years rose in the ranks in the company to like one of the highest levels possible.
And I see that too. Like, I mean, it's like with you or like with Gilles Messier. It's just like you get an author and you're just like, oh yeah, this one's going places. Like, and then you start your own thing. And
I'm still in the same city I lived in.
Well, no, but I mean, like where you started your own company and like just built it out from there. And Gilles the same. Like, he's involved in so many different things, and like, you both still write for me too, but like you have all this other stuff that you do as well. And like, yeah, it's just like that. Yeah, this one's going to do great at things. So when World War II hit, he switched from ice cream to something decidedly less easy on the digestive system, steel, working for the Bethlehem Steel Company, reportedly learning the trade of an electrician during his time with them, as well as climbing up the union ladder as a union representative. It was here that his life was changed forever when he observed how well the various mobile food service companies did selling their edible wares to the workers during breaks. He also saw many ways their distribution methods could be improved. Combining this with all... Yeah.
Because that's like normally where like these stories, that's the spark, right? It's more common in business than it is with invention, of when just someone realizes, okay, there's a gap in the market here, why is nobody filling it? Like, invention tends to be a lot more trial and error, whereas business, because it's so nebulous, you can have moments of just like that instant snap of realization of like, people should be doing it this way.
Well, and it's these people too of like, as you talk about like rising up, that are constantly like improving. They're always looking for stuff, ways to get better and stuff. And it's the same like in the writing and stuff. Like you, even from the beginning, we're always like wanting feedback and like what can we do better here or whatever like that. And that's really not the case with most. Like, but when you get those people who do that, and like him here, they're always looking for opportunities. They're always looking for how can you make things better. And then they go places.
It's also, like I said, recognizing a problem, like this sucks, let's fix it. I think to the tippy cup, presumably there's like an equivalent in the States of like the cups that kids can drink out of that don't spill. That was like partially invented by like a mum who's like, why isn't there a cup that doesn't spill? This sucks. And the story of how she got it sold is she went into like some meeting office with some company that made like baby toys and stuff for babies. And they're just, oh, it's some single mum who's got a company in a garage. I'm not really going to listen to her. And she just threw the tippy cup at his desk. It didn't spill. And just the executives proceeded to spend like the next like just 5 minutes like trying to get the water out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah. And just apparently no one had thought of it because it just wasn't an issue for anyone higher up.
So combining this with his previous experience with Jack and Jill selling their wares from trucks, after the war, he decided to start his own mobile restaurant company using $1,500, about $23,000 today, in war bonds he held, and borrowing another few $1,000s from friends and family. In 1946, he founded Industrial Luncheon Services in Quincy, Massachusetts, which, yes, is pronounced Quincy. Everyone says Quincy. It's not like John Quincy Adams. But anyways, it's supposed to be Quincy. Initially purchasing and converting used phone company trucks and taxi cabs to sell food from at various Boston area factories. As for these vehicles, he heavily modified them to be more suited for their new role as food trucks with stainless steel shelving integrated into their sides and thin metal doors that would swing up as awning to protect the food and customers from the elements while they made their purchases. The food truck
awesome.
Yeah.
I want that now. I want just a car to pull up and say, do you want a burger? Yeah.
Do they not have food trucks in Britain?
We don't have food trucks per se. We have ice cream vans.
Okay.
That's about as close as we get. But like food trucks are not really a thing. And if they are, they're normally at places specifically all parked. Mm-hmm. You have like a lot of pubs and stuff will have a food truck just parked outside. But the idea of having like a food truck that drives around or on the streets is not as common. You occasionally get things like burger vans at like football events and things like that.
They have Mexican food is really popular in food trucks, and it's like if you find the right food truck, they're often really good. Even though it's coming, I literally just a couple blocks away have one. It's just the little Mexican food truck that's amazing. It's really good. The food truck concept was a major hit, and within 3 years, he'd expanded his mobile empire to over 200 vehicles, countless vending machines, and even some in-plant cafeterias, all serving various factories and major work locations across multiple states. It was at this point it became apparent to Rosenberg that his bread and butter product was, in fact, bread-based, the humble donut. He also observed people's choice beverage to have with the sweet treat was, unsurprisingly, almost always something decidedly bitter in coffee. In fact, despite offering a variety of snack and beverage options, these two items alone accounted for almost half of the revenues of his company. Teaming up with his brother,
right? Coffee and donuts is one of those things. Like presumably he's the first person to notice that trend, but it just seems so ingrained, right? Bacon, eggs, coffee and donut. Tea and biscuits over in the UK.
Yeah, I was going to say tea and biscuits, like another, teaming up with his brother-in-law and former mentor at Jack and Jill, Harry Winokur, the 30-year-old Rosenberg then decided to open a decidedly wheelless location, which would specialize in selling these two staple products. And so it was that the Open Kettle opened its doors in 1948, 543 Southern Artery, Quincy, Massachusetts, with the location still in operation to this day. I've been there. Took pictures and everything. I was doing, we were filming a bunch for this new channel called Traveling Through History, which we're going to start publishing soon. And going around, I went around Quincy for like a week, just filming stuff. And there is a little part of the tour of Quincy where we're going to do, we're actually of that location.
How was it? Was the donuts better? It's like I've heard from friends who've been to like Ireland, for example, like the Guinness over in Ireland tastes better. Do the donuts taste better when you know you're having them in the original location?
I'm going to be honest, and because of my lack of liking of donuts, I actually mostly just took pictures outside and video and stuff. But yeah, going back to that, it's just donuts. I don't know. I think I'm going to like it. I'll eat it. And I'm like, yeah, this is good. And then it just makes me feel gross. And then for like a year or two, I won't have another donut.
It's the amount of calories.
Yeah.
I'll look at the calories and that's like 400 calories. It's like croissants. Like, they look nice, but when I look like a butter croissant and it's like 300-400 calories, and I just think to myself, that's 2 cheeseburgers. I'd rather have 2 cheeseburgers.
Yeah, exactly. Something a little more filling.
Mental math.
Yeah, a little more nutritious filling and not so greasy. I don't know. I don't. It's the same with like a Jack in the Box. I don't know if you have that in the UK. Oh, okay. The UK Jack in the Box is the best tasting of all the fast food, but without fail, afterwards it's just going to make you feel sick. It's just so greasy. Like something they do with their grease, but it's so good at the same time. So yeah.
I've on multiple occasions on my channel Fact Fiend espoused the benefits of the local takeaway in Sheffield. It's Kebabish. It's considered to be a local legend on delivery apps. and it was featured in the movie Four Lions, which was filmed here. And just there's something they do with their potato wedges where they fry them in the same place they fry their fried chicken. And they're just incredible.
Yeah, that probably would. Yeah, I can see that.
They're incredible.
Yeah.
They are. When I order from them, I've got to order some more wedges. Got to get those kebabish wedges. And it's to the point where when my friends visit and I say, oh, should we order a takeaway? It's like, you know what we're doing. They hanker for them.
I could see how that would be very tasty. Yeah.
There's like a place in Scunthorpe where I grew up, where I'll be going tomorrow. There's a pizza place, and they do this thing called Chip Spice. And I don't know what it is about this restaurant, but they do the best chips. That's fries for Americans of any takeaway I've ever been to. And I don't know what it is. Just they do the best fries, and I don't understand what it is they do to them that make them taste better than fries I've had from any other place.
So, as with his previous business ventures, this new location was a hit. In the first week alone, selling over 24,000 donuts at 5 cents a piece, which is 57 cents today. And expansion was soon in the air using the basic model perfected in the single location, namely offering a massive number of donut options, originally 52 types, which was a number unheard of in almost any other donut outlet at the time. Further, Rosenberg insisted on extreme high quality in both the coffee sold at the location and the donuts, with the former achieved by using more expensive beans than most of their competitors, and the latter assured by enacting a rule that any donut that sat for more than 5 hours on the shelf must be thrown out. Ultimately,
That's
happy.
the thing about Dunkin as well. It does good coffee. 'Cause whenever I visit the States, just they don't. I say, "Oh, can I get a coffee?" It's like they take me to Dunkin. It's like it's just really good coffee for the price that you're paying. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and it balances out with their other staple products, so it's great.
Yes.
Ultimately happy with the product and perfected model in the store, Rosenberg was, however, not happy with the name of the business and felt they'd sell a lot more donuts and coffee under a better brand name. Thus, as mentioned, he sat down with his various employees in 1950, and they set about fixing the issue with a brainstorming session. Ultimately, the company's architect, Bernard Healy, was deemed to have come up with the best suggestion, Dunkin' Donuts. This highlighted both that their major product was donuts and alluded to the coffee one could dunk in them. On this note, Rosenberg would regularly state that the key to his success in business was not in his own intelligence and ideas, but rather his talent for hiring people who were far smarter and more qualified than himself, and then simply listening to them. And as for his own...
Thunk it, right?
Yeah.
I love that about business. There's that famous quote about business, right? If you're the smartest person in the room, that's a bad room to be in, you should consider, right? Like, you shouldn't be in regards to business, you should never be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And it refers to the fact that, hey, if you might be an expert in one particular aspect, but you need to have someone in that room who's like better at marketing, better at building, engineering, that sort of thing, right? You want there to be a diversified pool of talent that you can pull from.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're sort of the boss, you do need to have a sense of each of these areas, and like that's what I always like.
The skill for a CEO.
Whenever
right?
we start something new, I'll always try to do a little bit of it, but like, yeah, everyone who works like here is far more skilled than me at these different things. But it's just like, that's the way, if you are more skilled than your employee at their job, then like, that's just going to be like create friction, one thing, because you're just like constantly correcting them or whatever. But number two, like, what are you even doing? You should not, your job is completely different. You should find someone who's like an expert at that and just could like trounce you. Yeah. He's exactly right. And as for his own contributions, he famously stated he was too dumb to make things complicated. Further elaborating on his whole philosophy of management, he stated, "A person does not build a business. A person builds an organization. An organization builds a business." Yeah, this guy knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, there's just a couple of very simple quotes about business that just make a lot of sense. It's like Bill Gates' famous one about always hire a lazy person to do a job because they'll figure out the quickest way to do it. And obviously, he doesn't mean just hire someone who's not going to do their job, but hire somebody who's naturally not inclinated to do it the hard way. Because if they figure out the easy way, and then get somebody in to figure out what makes the easy way and improve like your model, right?
Yeah, and Simon and I were talking about this we were talking about businesses in Europe versus America, and why does America like excel so much at certain business stuff, like when and progress so quickly sometimes? And we were talking about like just the unrelenting positivity that's the stereotype for America. I mean, obviously
American dream.
Yeah, exactly.
Millionaires, that sort of thing.
That sort of pervasive, just unrelenting optimism, but also it's just like Simon, he's just like, Americans will try to find the easiest way to do something. It's like maybe it's innate laziness or whatever, and then they'll just do it that way because it's easier type of thing. And it's just like, is there an easier way to do this? Whereas in his experience, he was like, companies like that he experienced over there, it's more just like, this is the way we've always done it. So
there's nothing more. Is the death knell for any business. This is the way we've always done it. Look at the pandemic, right? Of how many businesses struggle to adapt to work from home and still struggle and fight against it.
Even though they save
by every metric, it works.
Yeah, and they save a lot of money. Probably save their employees a lot of time because employees want to knock out the work and then get to their home life or whatever. You don't have to commute, the drive and stuff like that. At least in the U.S., the commutes for people driving can take a long time, and you're saving time. It's just better. They save office space on office money, and most stuff you don't need to be. We run our entire companies like remotely. It's not a problem.
By every metric, it works better, but there's just some dinosaurs at the top who are like, but this is the way we've always done it. And that's be dragged kicking and streaming into the 21st century. That always fascinated me, like the work from home things. I've worked freelance for over a decade now. It just makes sense, right? Especially for someone like yourself, of the level of, not the level, but the diversification of the talent you can pull from, right?
From anywhere.
Pull from your immediate surroundings. You've got the entire world.
And yeah, there's actually even some benefits, like even, so Washington State has some laws about like if you're, what you can do with a contract worker versus, regular employee and stuff like that. And there's a lot of red tape and things where if I hire someone from Britain, it just gets rid of all of that. Like it just makes it simpler. I'm not even sure if I'm saving money per necessarily, but it's just like on taxes or anything, it just makes it simpler. The entire paperwork side of it is just simpler. I gotta just be like, no, it's a foreign person, so, and they're, oh, okay.
But also at the same time, it's like, I'm able to work for a company all the way in America, and there's virtually zero friction in regards to that working relationship. Like for today, I've had to log onto my computer a little later than I normally would. That's it. Right.
Well, and it says there, you look at the scope, like today I found out we got people from Britain, Canada, a Venezuelan who lives in Spain, but for a while lived in France. That's Sam, our video editor. Add people in India. We're like all over. And it works because, like you say, you can just draw talent from anywhere.
Yeah. It's baffling to see companies, like I said, this is the way we've always done it. Yes, that's great, but that isn't the world you're in anymore.
Yeah. So, and as for that organization building, he notes, in unity there is strength. Consider the fragile snowflake that flutters slowly to the earth and disintegrates. However, if enough of them stick together, they can paralyze an entire city.
That's a classic. I don't think he came up with that. That's like that's a folk tale, right? About like the father handing his son like the arrows, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a fable. You can't take credit for that. That's hundreds of thousands of years old.
Yeah. But speaking of unity, in an age before McDonald's and other such franchise behemoths, inspired by another Quincy, Massachusetts company, Howard Johnson's, which we've also done a great video on. That one's super interesting. People should go watch it. Rosenberg had the idea to expand his little business via the then very controversial and legally embattled concept of franchising. His business partner and brother-in-law Harry Winokur did not agree and subsequently left Dunkin' Donuts, creating one of the world's other extremely successful donut businesses in Mr. Donut, which would go on to become the second largest donut company in the United States when Winokur realized the error of his ways and began franchising it out. If you're now wondering why you may not have heard of Mr. Donut, unless you live in Japan, that is, this is simply because a parent company ultimately purchased both companies and gave the Mr. Donut locations the option to switch to Dunkin' Donuts, which almost all did, combining the companies and bringing them full circle. Going back to Rosenberg.
Yeah, I like that's a full circle.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Adidas and Puma, the two German sports brands, just two brothers. Yeah, who just hated each other, and just his brother's like, okay, do you not want to be part of Adidas anymore? No, and just went and made a competing shoe company.
I loved that one too. They because they're in the same town, so there's like the dividing line. I think there was a river or something between. But also that during World War II, when the Allies were coming in to steamroll all the factories and everything, the wife of one of them, I can't remember which company, she literally stood in front of the factory and was like, "No, like you can't. We just make shoes. We're not, And she ended up getting them because they had heard of like some of the athletes that were using some of their product. And they were like, "Oh, you make those shoes?" And then she gave them like free shoes to the soldiers and stuff. And then they let their factory stand.
Just the idea, man, just some Allied soldier rolling on Berlin in like his fresh Adidas.
So going back to Rosenberg, using the franchising model, he proceeded to expand Dunkin' Donuts from the then 6 locations in 1955 to 100 locations by 1963 to 1,000 by 1979 and beyond. And for reference, today, Dunkin' Donuts operates in 42 countries with almost 13,000 locations. In any event, further seeing the need for an organization to protect the interests of the franchises, particularly needed at the time when some regions considered franchising, if not literally illegal, at least disreputable, in 1960, Rosenberg, on the side, founded the International Franchise Association, which today represents over 1,400 brands and some 30,000 franchises. So, unfortunately for Rosenberg, 11 years later in 1971, a bout with lung cancer had him needing to step down as chairman of the board of Dunkin' Donuts, though this wasn't a major issue as he'd previously already given over most of the day-to-day operations to his son Robert, naming him president of the company in 1963. However, not content just to sit around doing nothing, after his brush with cancerous death, he proceeded to spend his time focusing on horse breeding at his Wilrose Farms, ultimately becoming the largest standard bred breeder. Whatever.
I don't know horses.
I don't know horses either.
Right,
in all of New England, by 1979, his exploits with horses even landed him in the New England Hall of Fame of the standard bred industry. Oh, but why would you say bred breeder? Like, it seems like it's like a double. You could just say breeder.
Standard bred breeder. ATM machine.
Standard bred. Okay, so there must be like a different way.
Standard bred, thoroughbred, I imagine.
Okay, yeah. All right, now we're coming around. I think we're narrowing.
Thoroughbred must be a good horse. A standard bred's just a regular horse.
Yeah,
the ones that you just see just in a field. That's a standard bred.
Yeah, this is making more sense now. As with his donut empire, he gave the credit for this not to his own knowledge or ideas, noting he knew little about horses in the beginning, but simply stating all the credit should go to the talented people he hired and subsequently learned from. Shortly after his induction into the Breeding Hall of Fame in 1980, after a bout with cancer of the blood, he donated Wilrose Farms to the University of New Hampshire, and after this, philanthropy became his focus, unsurprisingly, focusing on cancer and diabetes. About a decade after this, Dunkin' Donuts was sold to Allied Lions. As for Rosenberg, while having little to do with the company after this and no longer even regularly partaking in the donut side of the business, owing to issues with his weight and diabetes, Rosenberg still remained something of a brand ambassador for the company until his death at the age of 86 on September the 22nd, 2002 of bladder cancer. As for how he went so far in life despite such humble origins and an almost complete lack of formal education, beyond noting his habit of surrounding himself with people more talented and knowledgeable than himself, Rosenberg summed up, "There are 2 ways to get to the top of an oak tree. You can sit on an acorn and wait for it to grow, or you can climb the tree." He's just full of good quotes.
That's a clever one. I like that. Of just, it's about tenacity, right? If you just stick at it, eventually you'll find success. Because I think it's some advice my dad gave me about luck, where it's you can't count on luck, but you can capitalize on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's what he said to me.
Good advice.
When I achieved like that first initial bout of success, I didn't know how to feel about it, and that's when my dad summed that up of like, son, like you couldn't have ever counted on being lucky, but you did put the work in so that when you were lucky, you capitalize on the chance.
Yeah,
and I've always seen that as a good. Yeah. Just one of those quotes. He probably stole it from someone, but I credit it to my dad.
That's a good one. So that is our stories for today. Anything to add?
Besides just all the tangents we went on, I'm a huge fan of these business stories, and it is nice when they are the way that history portrays them. By which I mean, there is that eureka moment, because very often, is the case with the eureka moment when it comes to business, technology, or invention. There's always more to it than is necessarily known, but just some of these stories, like the pump baron, you recognize that thing, and in that moment went, that's it.
Well, and I love these ones too, where it's these simple things like soap. Soap has been around for literally, humans have been making soap forever, and just this he innovated it slightly. And it wasn't even his invention, but he figured out how to market it and make it, package it in a way people could use. And it's just like this simple thing. And same ketchup, people, or horseradish sauce or whatever. These were not, it's not like he invented some new change the world device or this sort of thing. It was just this simple thing they started. I think another one, was it sriracha sauce? Whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, that one. Another one is just the guy liked to make sauce, and he started with it out of the back of his bike. when he immigrated to the U.S. and built from there. And he's still just all about just making the sauce. He's no.
Yes, I wrote that one for you a couple of years back. I love that guy's story where there's detail I like is that he specifically has to. He insists, and that's the other thing about a lot of these businesses that are successful, that it's of their insistence on a very particular way of doing things in regards to quality. Mm-hmm. And with him, it's like, well, I want the chilies to be processed within a day of being picked. Yeah. So I have to build my factory next to the only chili farm in the US big enough to fulfill our orders.
Well, and that was recently they had a whole year where they didn't produce any product because of that. He wasn't satisfied with the product because I can't remember if they picked it too green or it was too late. Something. So they threw out the entire batch. They did not make any that year because he has to make them fresh. He wouldn't use dried ones like other companies. And so for like a year there, you just couldn't get it.
And he can do that because he owns the company outright, similar to the Costco guy, right? Yeah. I'd love to write about this. I'm going to pitch this to you now. Can I write about the Costco, like $1.50 hot dog and a Coke?
Yes, that would be really interesting, actually, because
have you heard about the CEO of the former CEO, but he's still on the board of directors? When he was asked by the new CEO, like, what would happen if I changed the cost of that $1.50 Coke and a hot dog? The former CEO said, "I'll fucking kill you. I will beat you to death with my bare hands. Do not change the price of the hot dog."
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah.
Like the Arizona iced tea guy, right? Where it's like, why do you sell Arizona iced tea for $1 still? Because I own the company and that's what I want. We still make a profit on it, and I don't want to make any more money.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with I can't remember the guy's name, but yeah, he just likes making a sauce, and yeah, he also price fixes as well, and he requires that they can't and nobody can sell it for more than that.
And yeah, just in all those cases, they always talk about how there's other bigger companies looking to buy them out. And in those cases, they say no because they know the thing that makes their product so successful is not profitable.
Yeah, well, and he's already
profitable, but it's not as profitable as it could be.
His case, he's already so wealthy, and he doesn't care. He's already got enough money. He likes making his sauce the way he likes to make it.
And he knows that if he sold his company to a big conglomerate, the first thing they would do is start using dried chilies because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And
you can make it year
year
round instead of they are risking it because they just have this like few month period where they're making it and then nothing. That's very inefficient for his factory.
I've always had like a big respect for that sort of thing of just, this is the way we've like, ironically, someone would be like, this is the way we've always done it, but used for a good reason of, we're going to keep making the fresh products that people like because that's the way we've always done it. And if we stop doing it that way, people wouldn't buy the product.
So that's the episode for today. Hope everyone enjoyed it. And people can check out too, I forgot to mention, if you don't want to watch it on YouTube or whatever, you can go to the BrainFood Show podcast. Links in the description. And have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. See you all next time. Cheers.